When high school was over, I had to make a decision. My parents wanted me to go to college, but I really wanted to play professional music. And I knew if I stayed in a little place like Rhode Island, I'll never really get anywhere. So I made the decision I'm going to go to California. Now, I was fortunate that my sister had already moved. My older sister, Marie, she had already moved to California, and she was already living and working there. So I had some place to go. And I never forget, I went over to visit my friend Michael. And Michael I had known since we were in the 6th grade. We were 11 years old. But I never knew. All the years, junior high school, we'd hang out together. But he never told me he played piano. And one day I came over his house to visit. He didn't know I was coming. And he's downstairs rocking away in his basement playing the piano. Michael, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm going to be going to Rhode Island College this year. I said, forget college. Come with me. I'm going to go to California. Doesn't that sound better? He said, it does sound better. So crazy Michael decides he's going to come to California with me. And then the drummer I had played with, his name was Tony Pasquazzi. You have to understand, everybody in my neighborhood had an Italian name. Tony Pasquazzi, Mike Iannichilli, Stevie Salvatore, Tony Aquilante. These were all names of people that I grew up with, that I played music with. Well, Tony, he had one day went off to work. And he just was discouraged with the way his life was going. He never made it to work. He just kept driving. He ended up in Texas and his car broke down. Nobody heard from him for 2 or 3 days. And he calls me up and said, John, you need to send me some money. Go to my mother and see if you can get some money. My car broke down. I said, where you going, Tony? He said, I don't know. I just don't want to stay in Rhode Island. I said, Tony, I'm leaving just in a couple of days for California. When your car gets fixed, meet me. Here's the address. So you can imagine, my sister had just moved in with her boyfriend. Now, they're married today. They've been married now for 45 years. But he wasn't my brother-in-law back then, and I hardly knew him. And suddenly, these 3 guys show up, his girlfriend's teenage brother and 2 friends, and it's like, hi, we're here. Where can we sleep? Well, that didn't last very long. And he helped us find a house. And we found a house with a guy named Sonny who used to build Harley Davidson. And he let us have rooms. He had a big house in a place called Van Nuys. We were right in the valley. And it's unusual to be in an area where it was just what they call track houses. And we had a house with over 1 acre land. Matter of fact, we even had a horse that used to be stabled out in the back of the yard. And that's where we started to live. I also got to meet somebody, a music producer. I think my sister introduced me to him. I don't know where she met him. Maybe he also lived up in the area where she lived, called Susanna Knowles. So a lot of freaky people, music people, Hollywood people used to live there. And she introduced me to this guy. And through him, I met a guy named David Oliver. He was a singer. He had worked with people like Sly and the Family Stone, and he seemed to know a lot of people in the business. So we're new to California. We don't know anything. And the next thing we know, we're putting a band together, and the idea was we're going to fuse heavy metal, which is what we were into, bands like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, and we're going to fuse that with funk. And we're going to make a fusion of funk and heavy metal and see what happens. Well, through David, we ended up getting a recording session in Paramount Studios. Now, you have to understand, 45 years ago, 50 years ago, to go into a studio was already a big honor. You couldn't have a small studio in your living room like you can today. You can't just buy a sound card and record on your computer. That didn't exist back then. So for the first time, I'm in a professional studio and I hear my guitar for the first time. I can't tell you what a rush that was to hear my guitar and then to do a second one on top of it and double track my guitar. Boy, that was cool. Somebody walked into the studio. Her name was Bonnie Bramlett. I guess David knew her. She was Bonnie from Delaney and Bonnie, and they had just finished a world tour with Eric Clapton. And she's in the studio to sing backup with us. So you got to get this picture. I'm not even 19 years old. I'm in a studio for the first time. We have a guy producing and engineering that had worked with The Who, and Bonnie Bramlett walks in to sing backup. I mean, like, I'm totally flipped out. This is happening. We're seeing it happen. Being in Paramount with David Oliver, I got to meet somebody else who would also have an influence in our music, and his name was Artie King. Artie King had been the live sound engineer for Alice Cooper. And I remember seeing Alice Cooper. I was 15. Me and my friend Jackie, we drove to Connecticut. They were doing an outdoor concert. And I remember him and I snuck in the concert. We hopped the fence and we had a plan. Soon as Alice hit the stage, everybody jumps up. We go over the fence. We crawl under everybody's legs and we make it as far forward as possible. Well, we made it as far forward as the platform that the sound engineer had built his mixing board on. So we climb up the soundboard, and this big black guy says to us, "What are you doing up here?" And we said, "Hey, we'll be your bodyguards. We'll keep everybody off this platform if we can stay here." He said, "You got the job." Well, wouldn't you know it? It's the same Artie King that we get to meet through David Oliver. And as the band fell apart with David, unfortunately, personality-wise, we didn't work together. And the music was cool, but the personalities we clashed. But my relationship with Artie was one that would bring us into a place called the Record Plant. And it wasn't just Artie, it was also somebody that was about to come into my life that would help us musically and actually influence me tremendously. His name was Ritchie Blackmore.